is Serena, and I am an OFIS ambassador. We're delighted to gather everyone together again for this month's community talk, hosted by Our Future is Science. This series is part of the Mentorship Ambassador and Champions program of Our Future is Science, and we're so happy to welcome the public as Zoom allows us to democratize these programs. OFIS is an initiative between the Aspen Institute's Science and Society program, a nonpartisan organization. As a nonpartisan organization, we are committed to sparking curiosity, passion, and confidence about STEM in young people to push science forward in the 21st century and solve society's most pressing issues. We are generously supported by Amgen Foundation, the Samueli Foundation, Burroughs Welcome Fund, 3M, and the Carson Family Charitable Trust. Without these funders, none of this would be possible. The Community Talk series is a program to expose individuals to diverse careers, as well as information, insights, and perspectives on the intersections of STEM disciplines and social justice issues. Moving on to tonight's talk, we'll focus on empowering change through civic science, understanding engagement, policy, and fairness, and I'll turn it over to Tess, who is also an ambassador with OFIS.
Good evening. We have 3 speakers tonight who will talk about what civic engagement is and how to impact change. We will hold questions until the end, but for now, let's extend a warm welcome to tonight's first speaker, Noelani Cubillos-Sanchez. Noelani serves as the Civic Leadership Program Specialist for the Center for Civic and Community Engaged Leadership to promote civic engagement, literacy, and expand student voter engagement. Noelani also oversees students in the community-based federal work-study program known as the Rowdy Corps Community Scholars, assigned to local, assigned to local civic engagement community organizations and public serving agencies. Noelani serves as primary contact for the community engagement platform UTSA Engaged with the University of Texas, San Antonio. Her dedication to expanding nonpartisan voter engagement and education is also demonstrated by her fellowship position with organization All In Campus Democracy Challenges Communities of Practice for Hispanic Serving Institutions. Noelani will introduce the concept of civics and explain how community involvement and understanding civic duties foster and empower communities.
Awesome. Thank you, Tess, for that introduction. I apologize. It's very wordy. I still stumble over my own biography. Thank you all for joining us today. So I guess I can go ahead and begin by sharing how I got interested in this field of work. I believe it should be on my next slide. Oh, no, that's just me. So a little background. I'm from the border of El Paso, Texas. I did graduate from UTSA in 2019 with a bachelor's in public administration. And since this is a science-based community conversation, if I had to do it all over again, I would totally be a STEM major, which now segues to how I got interested in this work. So from a very young age, I was very passionate about being out in nature, outdoors, and I just grew to become interested in ecological conservation, which prompted me to understand how to organize communities and raise awareness of various ways that they can advocate for policies that conserve the environment or just the way that they're built as the population expands. I think we can go to the next slide, Ebony. Okay, we'll pause on that. A little more. So the root cause of my work is promoting full civic engagement and empowering every voter with the confidence and skill set that they need to engage within the democratic process. And a lot of that begins with this base question of what exactly is civic engagement? How does it differ from community engagement? So there is a definition from the Strengthening American Democracy Guide, which was developed by the Students Learn, Students Vote Network. And it's any act, such as community organizing, that's intended to improve or influence a community through either deliberation, collaboration, and reciprocal relationships and community building. And I would say the work that I do with UTSA and with All in Campus Democracy Challenge connects to OFIS's mission by, facilitating the way to position youth leaders as yourselves to be societally minded, to be innovative in your approach. And also, we just seek to understand students' lived experiences and those experiences and how they shape everybody's understanding of the democratic process. Once we have that base understanding, uh, then we can create programming around how to support that expansion of understanding. I think we can go to the next slide. I should have reviewed my slides a little more. So continuing on with that definition of civic engagement, here on the left, we have an action shot of the art of deliberation. We hosted a democracy dialogue, or I'm sorry, we co-hosted a democracy dialogue where students practice their skills on how to have just a basic civil conversation surrounding some topics that usually lead into shouting matches. But the questions were very nonpartisan, very values-based, where we ask them things such as, what does democracy mean to me as a person? How has it affected my life? What would a life without democracy look like? And so then the second slide right here with Radical Registrars, they're one of our amazing community partners. That kind of demonstrates the reciprocal relationship and the community building. They're a nonprofit organization who does a lot of voter mobilization and voter empowerment work as well. They help build out our capacity. We're a three-person office, so I rely heavily on community partners to come to campus and engage with our students and help them answer any burning questions that students have. And then lastly, the community building here on the far right. The picture is a little cut off, but we do have a lot of community partners. We've got about 40 who take our work study students and just give them that professional and leadership development. And then in turn, the nonprofit organization, their capacity gets built. Like they basically have a student intern that they don't have to pay for. I believe we can go to the next slide, Ebony. Thank you. I think that was it, actually. But I guess the connection, there's a question about what is the connection between science and social justice. To me, I think of science and it's very evidence-based, right? And following that logic, I think science serves as a great way to dismantle a lot of misinformation and disinformation. And then that will help guide policy leaders to hopefully draft policies and legislation that are more pro-science and more pro-social justice. Uh, that's where I feel science and social justice intersect. And I lost a little track on my time, Ebony. Or how are we doing?
You're good with time.
Okay. Lastly, or I guess next, I think there's a question of how do we create more just and equitable opportunities for STEM students? I've noticed a lot of success in an example is our flagship program here at UTSA, which is a community-based federal work study program where you take students who are from or who are eligible for work study, historically are underrepresented and how may I put this? Well, they have financial needs. So by giving them these opportunities to connect with the surrounding community, they get to embed themselves within the community and help nonprofit organizations that in turn are helping those historically marginalized communities as well. So you go, you meet them where they're at. And then I think that just serves as a good pipeline between institutes of higher education and the local community, which I feel segues into the next question of how to dismantle the historic barriers to science for BIPOC communities. same thing. You're meeting students where they're at and asking them, what do we need? What do you need from us to support you? And just really facilitating that journey from the beginning of their college or their academic career until they graduate, giving them as much professional and leadership development as possible, and finding those ways that they can reach their surrounding community. And that's about all I have to share at the moment. I can popcorn it over to the next speaker. I'm looking forward to the question and answer section so we can talk some more because I can chat all day.
Thank you so much, Noelani, for setting the stage for what civics is and why it's important. And now I'd like to welcome our next speaker. Dr. Michael Akinwumi is the Chief AI Officer at the National Fair Housing Alliance, where he leads efforts to ensure safe, secure, and trustworthy AI principles and practices in the housing sector. He focuses on AI governance, risk management, and innovation, working with both public and private sectors to research, test, and promote responsible AI systems that align with fair housing and lending goals. As an Eagleton Civic Science Fellow, Dr. Akinwumi is creating a governance framework using large language models to help state legislators evaluate AI-related bill provisions. With a PhD in applied mathematics, his prior work spans various sectors, including fintech, insurance, and retail banking. Dr. Akinwumi is guided by the philosophy that a life lived for others is truly worthwhile. He will provide insights into how science and data are used in civic spaces to address equity, fairness, and housing policy.
Thank you so much for the warm introduction, and good evening or good day, everyone, depending on where you are. And Noelani, I really enjoyed your presentation, and thanks for the definition that you actually gave about civic engagement or civic science and what it is. So I'll try to actually explain how civic engagement applies to what I do in my day-to-day job. But I'm going to begin my presentation by asking two questions. And I'm hoping that the audience can actually note the questions and also the answers to the questions. So the first question is, if you can go to the next slide. So the first question is, what about your future in STEM disciplines are you afraid of? So you need to be able to actually put a name on your fear, right? And then my second question is, what in the society or your community reinforces the fear that you have about your future in STEM disciplines? So I encourage you to write down your answers and let your answers guide you through as you listen to my presentation. So my expectation is that after talking to you about, the one way to rise above limitations in STEM disciplines, I'm hoping that you get to work on confronting your fear. And, just by way of introduction, I'd like to let you know that my country of birth is Nigeria. And growing up in Nigeria, I actually experienced structural limitations that society or communities can place on an individual. And I'm also a Canadian, and that gives me different perspectives in terms of how to rise above limitations that societies or communities can play on your aspirations. And I consider myself to be a mathematical scientist. And what I mean by a mathematical scientist is that you would find me using mathematics and its two children or cousins, which are statistics and computing science, in both my personal life and professional work that involve or include civic engagement. And just like I was introduced, so I currently serve as Chief AI Officer for the National Fair Housing Alliance, which is a civil rights organization that is dedicated to eliminating any form of discrimination in housing and other related services. And, the practical insights that I'm going to be sharing with you will be coming from the practical experience that I have working at the intersection of fair housing and AI using my STEM training, as well as my civic science experience coming from my fellowship engagement at Rutgers University. And my fun fact is I really enjoy playing and watching soccer, ping pong, and tennis. In fact, I have two boys here that keep me really active. So we also try to actually compete when it comes like playing soccer, especially. So now, if we go back to your answers to the two questions I had earlier, so how do you go from what I would say being a boy to being a man? And what I really mean by that metaphor is how do you create solutions that address or eliminate your fear, which you've named? So I'm going to show you a strategy that works for me by telling you three things in my presentation. So first, I'll tell you the role of social awareness, social consciousness in applying your whole self to society, in being the change the world needs. And two, I'm going to share one example of, or a couple of examples from what I do in my role as a chief AI officer and also a civic science fellow. So that may give you insight into how you actually connect science to communities, how you do civic science or engagement in real life. And lastly, I'll share my career journey with you with the hope that you get inspired. So my expectation is that your passion to become a problem solver, tackling the world's most present challenges will be on steroid after my talk. Next slide, please. So if you've been to a park or wherever you've been to, you might have seen, waste, garbage bin or waste disposal, right? And you might be thinking, even if you've been to places where you are not seeing garbage bags or garbage bins, right? Then you have to think that, okay, who really cleans up the community, right? So proper waste disposal is really a shared duty that maintains community cleanliness. Otherwise, if the duty is not shared and there are no people that clean up our communities, then we all most likely going to be sick. And also, properly disposing of waste requires individual action for communal cleanliness. And in that way, I'll tell you that you cannot channel your individual contributions to the greater good of the society or your community if you are not socially aware or socially conscious, right? So, and when you're thinking about social consciousness or social awareness, in my own experience, it actually dates back to when I was in high school. So you would find me really interested in social studies, but at the same time, I really appreciated, science disciplines, physics, chemistry, math. But I was all doing that to connect those scientific disciplines or principles to solving problems in the society. So your path to using STEM or STEAM disciplines in the advancement of the greater good, I would say start with being aware of societal structures, norms, issues, inequities, injustices, and how they're connected to social problems. Like I'm really dating back to when I was in high school, extremely dissatisfied with any appearance of inequities and disparities. You will find me writing stories, critiquing, using scientific argument and all that. And till date, I strongly believe that mathematical sciences, which is math, statistics, computing science, they can address wicked problems, which are really generally social problems that seems to defy solutions. And of course, as you try to think about it, there may be some limitations, right? For example, we don't decide who our parents are or going to be. We don't decide what countries we actually come to live, right? To be born. So, and all these can work together to actually constrain you, for example, in a way that manifests as poverty or so, right? But I can tell you that I've had my own share of how those can come together and really try to put a limitation on how far you can actually take your disciplines as a scientist or somebody who is really interested in sciences, right, to another level. So again, I'm going to really reiterate that when it comes to coming up with evidence-based policies, right, that actually cause real change in the society, it is socially aware and socially conscious STEM practitioners that actually make the contributions that lead to the real change that you see in society. And just for you to really believe that, yes, you have to be socially conscious, yes, you have to be socially aware before you can contribute to policies using your scientific disciplines. I'll show you, I hope you will see how I practice that in my role as a chief AI officer in the next slide. Next slide, please. It didn't turn out the way I expect. Can you please go back a little, just previous slide? Because I was expecting the bill that was in the slide. Oh, okay. Okay, no, before we get to this, so I was in the slide, I was hoping that the AI bill that I review with legal practitioners and other civil rights advocates would actually show up here. But what I really like you to think about as the responsibilities of a chief AI officer, I like to actually put it in three buckets. So I say I wear three hats, right? So innovation is one, risk management is one, and governance is the third one. So innovation requires a strong technical background. Before you can actually connect the dots, you need to be thinking about how strong you are in terms of like your disciplines and also some of the trainings. And risk management requires both being socially aware and socially conscious. And lastly, effective governance requires being able to connect the dots between innovation and risk management. So in my day-to-day work, I contribute to efforts to ensure that AI systems and housing are safe, secure, and trustworthy. So I combine social awareness and social consciousness with STEM competencies in collaborations with public policy professionals, civil rights groups, and legal experts. So for example, you would find me working with lawyers, with public policy, with advocates or other civil rights communities to review these, right? Like AI bills, for example. And there are things that will come out like algorithmic fairness and privacy. So I work with them to actually see what the implications of those are in real life. And next slide, please. All right, so you might be wondering, okay, how did I even get to where I am now? Because my intention is really to inspire you to get to a point where, in 5, 10 years, right, you can actually reach out to me and say, Michael, thanks for your presentation. I was actually really able to get to a point where, yes, I feel really like I'm applying my interest in sciences to solving the problem. So I started even after all my studies, I started by working for insurance company, where again, insurance is what affects real people. But I was really involved in, negotiating and also developing these models and making sure that they actually don't impact people in a negative way. And also even working in bank, developing some models that influence or impact customer service operations. So I was able to actually see how you can apply STEM disciplines in real life, and at the same time, making sure that customers are not harmed. And also alternative credit scoring solutions so that at least people who are historically excluded in credit scoring applications, they become visible. And more recently, just like I shared with you, you'd find me advising or playing the role of a science policy advisor, making sure that the laws that we legislate are actually implementable, they are practical, and then also enforceable. And of course, the opportunities are limitless. Next slide, which I believe is the last slide. So in terms of like my contact information, and that's all. I'll be happy to take any questions that you have. So yeah, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Akinwumi, for sharing your work and your career path. Our final speaker tonight is Sejal Goud, a senior at Princeton University studying public policy and international affairs as a Frederick P. Hitz 61 Scholar in the Nation's Service Initiative. Sejal is a program initiative at Aspen Institute's Science and Society program, where she began as an intern in 2022 and later served as communications coordinator. In her current role, she convenes roundtables and contributes to signature publications. Last summer, she was also a regional policy and public outreach fellow at the U.S. Department of State. Her independent research focuses on Latin American climate mobility policy and has tackled issues like environmental protection, affordable housing law, and climate mobility, with findings presented to the U.S. National Security Council. At Princeton, Sejal is head features editor of the Daily Princetonian, an ethics of policy fellow, and an active member of organizations such as El Centro ESL and Vote 100. Sejal will focus on how policy is created and making informed policies that serve the public good.
Hi, everyone. If we could go to the next slide, please. So thanks so much for that introduction. My name is Sejal. I'm from Broomfield, Colorado, and as was mentioned, I'm currently a senior here at Princeton University, getting my bachelor's degree in public policy and international affairs. And then I'll also be continuing on starting next year to do my master's in public affairs as well, also at Princeton. And I also serve as a program associate at the Aspen Institute Science and Society program. And then fun fact about me is that I'm currently learning Portuguese. Next slide, please. So just to get started in kind of how I got interested in policy in the first place and kind of how I view policy. For me, from a young age, my family benefited a lot from various social programs, and I knew that as I kind of continued my education and really had this opportunity to attend Princeton, I wanted to use that in a way where I could give back. And so I've been doing that through what's called the Scholars in the Nation Service Initiative. And that's what a program that's enabled me to have my internship at the State Department this past summer, and is also the fellowship that will fund my master's degree going forward. And for me, you know, I think when we, especially coming into university, I didn't really feel like I had a strong understanding of what policy was, or I guess I could say that I think my understanding of policy was really quite narrow. I kind of only viewed it from that lens of watching a bill become a law. And I think we saw really well in Michael's presentation that that's a really important and impactful way that we can intervene in and inform and really shape the policy process and the outcomes that can have for equity on the ground. But then also, as I've gotten to through my coursework and also through different internship experiences, I've done a lot of work with grants and also gotten to see how grant making can be a really impactful form of policy as well. And so I'll speak to that a little bit later. But I also wanted to use this opportunity to just kind of speak to those of you who might be interested in, let's say combining your education in a STEM field with policy and an deeper understanding of policy as well. I know that's something that a lot of my peers here are doing, and I've seen that that's been a really complementary interest for people. And so for me, something that's been really, really crucial and that's really enhanced my experience as a student has been seeking out coursework that really bridges learning in the classroom with actually getting to go out and do community work and think about creating policy on behalf of like a community partner or kind of a client, if you will. So for instance, right now I'm taking a class in global health policy, and I am working with an organization here in New Jersey called Programs for Parents. And so what I've been doing for them is thinking about how home-based childcare providers who historically, a lot of folks working in the field are Black and women of color, and have also, faced a lot of issues and barriers seeking out insurance care for themselves, thinking about how we can, how organizations, especially those funded by the state, can work towards creating better healthcare outcomes for those who are providing care for children in our communities. And so getting to, do interviews for them, help them thinking about like putting together focus groups, but then also doing a lot of reading into the data and thinking about what, using science to inform those policies can look like, has been a really great way to get hands-on experience in what policy can look like. And then another thing that I think I maybe shied away from at the beginning, but have really grown to embrace, is thinking about how, data speaks volumes, but so do personal experiences. And it's okay to use those two things together and in tandem, and to see them work together. So in my introduction to policy class, I have this really distinct memory of writing a memo about like school lunches. And I was someone who was on like free and reduced school lunch in high school. And so as I was thinking about what policy changes could look like and what it might mean to for my state of Colorado to go all free lunches for all students, I was also thinking about, what kind of impacts might that have in the way that people are, using programs like school lunch to then qualify for application waivers to get into college, right? That's something that someone who doesn't have that perspective might not have been thinking about. But for me, having that lived experience, I really wanted to bring that to the table and let that shine through in my work. So I think also just not shying away from that, and thinking about how data and storytelling both really matter when it comes to policy. Next slide, please. And then as students, another thing that I want to encourage you to do is really reflect on the many roles that you play as a connector and a synthesizer in your communities. I think as a student, like our big job is to learn and to, inhabit really diverse spaces where a lot of different perspectives are coming together, whether that's our schools or our extracurricular activities. And so for me, stepping into my role at the Aspen Institute and still being a policy student where, maybe I'm not necessarily the one at the negotiating table myself, but I want to have an influence and kind of start to get a feel for how I can in the future bring my experiences to the table. Been thinking a lot about what it means to convene others. So for instance, as a program associate, one of the things that we do at the Aspen Institute is bring together roundtables with different community leaders and experts. And so my role in authoring those reports means that even though it's maybe not my direct experience that's being communicated there, I get to be the one to step back and kind of connect the dots. And so that's a way to, contribute to policy, right? That gets read by people all across the country and all across the world. And so that can really shape their outlook on what kind of things are possible. And so even, through OFIS, as you think about working with your capstone projects as mentees and sort of kind of approach what issues you're seeing on the ground in your community, I think being the one to set the table, right? You want to be the one to bring people together. And I think that's actually, another way that you can collect data that is part of the scientific method as well, is to actually, create space for people to share their experiences. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on the importance of, when you go into opportunities like an internship, it's really important to kind of get out of your comfort zone and feel like you can work on a related challenge from multiple perspectives. And so, thinking about my time at the State Department this summer, which I should preface, I'm just speaking from my experiences and not on behalf of the organization. But I got to work across a wide number of teams. So I was helping on the grants team, helping on the data, kind of the data policy side, and then our press team as well. And so kind of jumping back and forth between those, I really got to see how all of those different parts of a team come together to inform policy. And I can say, for instance, when it comes to data, I hadn't really thought about negotiations around data as part of policymaking and what kind of impact that can have, but that's something that that was an area where my viewpoint really changed walking out of this internship, because I got to see both how diplomacy can happen around data, right? So there can be, in the international sphere, different countries are coming together to create agreements about how data gets used and how data gets shared. So it's not just data informing policy, but policy and how we interact with other players, other stakeholders, also has a lot of implications down the line for what data we have access to. And so I think about that. One of the examples that we talked a lot about in our office was like our treaties around GPS, right? GPS systems or global positioning systems influence a lot of the way that we run our lives. It goes into the way that we, get to map the world around us, whether that's kind of just on our traffic and our like daily commute, but also, thinking about when we're doing like analyses about fair housing, right? And so it all kind of trickles down. And at the end of the day, you get to see how, something like whether it's a large scale negotiation or, creating grant and funding opportunities to empower like local partners who are working with our embassies all across the world to then, put in place climate resilience projects in their country. All of that is policy, and all of that are ways that science and social justice issues can come together. And I think that was my last slide, but let's see. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sejal, for a terrific talk and explaining how making informed policies can serve the public good. We'd like to ask everyone to turn your cameras back on for the remaining part of our discussion. And I'll turn it over to Hassan and Caroline to lead us through the Q&A.
Thanks, Danea. So this is another reminder to everybody. You can put your questions in the chat and we will ask you to unmute and ask your question out loud. But we do have some questions already in the way. So this one is for all of our speakers. We're thinking, given the importance of data or information in policy, how do you deal with people not necessarily believing in science or, falling for misinformation?
I can take a stab at it. It starts with asking that person, what has your experience been? Where does that distrust come from? And how did you grow up learning what science is and what are good science practices? Honoring that this is a person whose ideas should be respected and they are humans, and just seeking to understand what got them to that point. Then you can start that nice civil dialogue.
Yeah, to add on to what Noelani said, I think not just asking them about their experience with science more generally, but also about whatever the specific topic at hand is, and kind of asking them, in what ways did you feel like your perspective, was or wasn't represented in this information that's being shared with you? And especially if you're in a policymaking position, I think it's really important to use that as an opportunity to ask them going forward, how do you feel like you and your community should be reached out to so that your voice can be part of this in the future?
And I would just add to the excellent remarks from the two speakers. From my own experience, I think I also tap on the deliberation element of civic engagement. And I mean, it took me even some time to make the transition, even in my career, given that I'm coming from a strong technical background, to start having conversations about what really comes before the data. I mean, the reality is that data is a representation of realities in people's life, right? So when in my day-to-day work, I encounter people that are actually struggling with even understanding or appreciating some of the data-driven insights. So I usually begin by trying to understand what their concerns are. And with that, also helping them to, I would say, humanize that data, helping them to see that these data points that you're looking at, they are stories of some people, right? And I find that with that, I'm able to like negotiate well with them, getting them involved in the deliberation process, and that works. Now, there are instances where that don't work, where it actually becomes obvious that, well, this person has just made up their mind, maybe for for some other reasons or incentives, right? But at least most of the time, towing the line or the toll of like the storytelling, humanizing the data seem to work.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Angela, you have your hand up. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, thank you guys so much for talking today. I just wanted to get like all of the speakers' perspective because I think that for myself, I'm not sure for others in this group, a lot of the social justice that I learned was self-guided. So is there like an area that you recommend that our students start with or that people start with in their own like personal education journeys into becoming more aware and better for like civic engagement?
I think it would be sort of similar, Angela, to my own experience. That got me into civic engagement work is there's some kind of issue or public policy concern that intrigues you or affects you. And with me, of course, it was ecological conservation, but that just led me to ask the question of why? Why aren't more people upset about this? Why aren't more legislators passing these policies? And so that led me to understand just exactly how our government works, which is why I got a degree in public administration, because I came to find out that I knew very little about how our government operates. So I would say, yes, start with an interest and find that thread that connects it to the larger systemic things.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it better. So I 100% agree with what Noelani said. Like in my slide, I was talking about social consciousness, right? So if we really look hard enough, there must be something that really makes our heart sing, right? And doing self-reflection, trying to identify that, whatever really, allows the fire in you to actually burn, right? I want to believe that that's where the connection is because, like, for me, there are a couple of issues that I saw. I mean, societal issues, inequities, discriminations, and all that, right? Which were even outside my traditional training, right? And but because I was really interested, and I know that these are issues affecting people, and like Noelani said, I identified the one that I feel that yes, this is really what makes me sing or dance. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think once you find that one area you resonate with, also thinking about it in terms of like a broader theme or a value that's within that. So for me, I felt like the idea of resilience was really a through line in all of the things that I've cared about, whether that's thinking about resilience in terms of like immigrant communities, my own background, and also those who I engage with through my like tutoring work that I do. But then also like resilience in terms of our ecosystem. And that's actually like what's led me to my senior thesis research, where I've gotten to combine those two and think about what does it look like when communities are moving in the face of climate challenges. And so really allowing yourself to start with one area and then kind of follow the rabbit hole and see where that leads you as well.
Great. Those are all wonderful responses. We have another question from one of our mentees, Akuria. If you'd like to unmute and ask your question.
I asked, as women in your field, do you think that that has an impact on your learning or work? And if so, what would you tell others that might encounter the same thing?
Well, I can share my own experience. So I think on my slide, I was talking about poverty or growing up in poverty and all that, right? And that really put a limitation on what choices I could make. Like some of my high school mates, they were thinking of, studying medicine, engineering, and all that, right? And all that cost money. But I knew that I was really talented in math. So I decided, well, I'll just study math. But to be honest with you, the reason I decided to study math was because I thought, well, I mean, all you need is just a pen and paper, right? You don't, I mean, it doesn't really cost that much. But during my one of my classes, I was able, so there was a course that I took, and I'll never forget that course, statistical inference, which is applied math. There were some exercises that I did, and also some capstone projects that I was analyzing social data, right? And the other time I was talking about what really makes my heart sing, right? And I was able to actually see that connection between what I really love, which is math, and at the same time trying to solve social problems. And I'll tell you, that was really the time that I just decided that the path I really want to go is that path of civic engagement that is actually driven by mathematical science. So that's what really has a lasting impact on me.
Thank you, Dr. Akinwumi. For Noelani or Sejal, have you seen any challenges while navigating the space of science policy as women? And if so, do you have any tips for our mentees?
Yeah, I guess I can kind of answer that both in terms of being a woman and kind of being a younger person in the field. I think both of both relate to having really strong mentors and what that can do for you. But I also think that, being a woman in the field also has its advantages because you're getting to advocate for a perspective and advocate for, you know, I can, so my mentor this summer at the State Department, one of her roles was she was a gender and climate advisor. And so what I got to do was work with her on some different like grant programs that were focused on empowering women all across the world who were really spearheading like climate resilience projects in their countries. And so we got to think and like do the like evaluations and go through that whole process from, kind of seeing the project proposals come in and thinking about, what the implications for equity were at each of those stages to, reading reports of how that funding was being used and like the tangible impacts that it was making in people's lives. And so I think getting to actually look at that from the lens of gender, which is, I think, at least in our kind of dominant discourse of how we think about science policy and especially environmental policy, isn't a perspective that's so present, has actually been really, really wonderful.
Yeah, I'll stick with the more positive aspects about, I'm not in the science field, or I'm in the social science field. But being a woman, it has come with its challenges, and it has impacted my learning in the sense that I really had to come to learn to trust myself and not gaslight myself or feel that imposter syndrome, like I don't belong here. I don't look like any of the other people here. I don't have the same education or background. It's really pushed me to go even further in this field of work because representation matters, right? And I want to encourage others, keep going. And when you feel like you don't belong, seek out your support system, seek out those mentors that you have, if you have any. And just they will gas you up and keep you going. um, yeah.
All right, great. Thank you very much. So we do have one question from the staff. Um, this one is for Dr. Akinwumi. So we've had students in the past who've typically chosen capstone projects that are focused on housing in a lot of different areas of the country. So if there was a student or a team that wanted to build a capstone project on housing inequity, what are some ways that they could have an impact in the short term? Because their capstones would be due in May and June.
Well, I mean, I'm glad you asked that question because literally, I mean, earlier today, I had a similar conversation with a professor and a student on what they can do in short time, right? I would say that, at least from my own experience, first thing is I would encourage the students to actually reach out to civil rights organizations or human rights organizations that are familiar with some of these issues. And I think gone are the days that we probably think some of these organizations that are deeply invested in addressing social issues are not interested in technical background, right? So I'll just give an example for this particular student that is really interested in maybe working on a capstone that will have significant impact, right? I would say I have a lot of projects that they can actually work on. Now, given the internal resources that we have, we can actually leverage some of the insights that will come from those working on a capstone project to advance our advocacy effort. So reaching out to organizations that are already in the space and then helping them to actually see how insights from your work, data-driven insight, can advance their policy positions is the quickest way. And so I encourage the students to actually reach out. So for example, I just see a link now in the chat. We have hackathons that are coming up. I encourage students to be part of it. And these are these are problems that we have immediate impacts, positive impacts in housing. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It definitely does. Thank you, Dr. Akinwumi. And also a larger thank you to all of our speakers. So Noelani Cubillos-Sanchez, Dr. Akinwumi, and Sejal Goud. Thank you very much for sharing everything that you know with us today. A big round of applause from everybody here at OFIS. So there's a lot that we learned today in terms of sharing our experiences and perspectives to demonstrate how civic science can be a tool to leverage, promote justice, and foster positive societal change. Forgive me. We hope that it'll help our mentees and our mentors as they build out their capstone projects. And another big thank you to everybody here in the audience for attending this community talk. You can extend your appreciation to our speakers in the chat. For anybody who's curious about learning more about our program, if you aren't familiar, please visit our website, Our Future is Science. You can also follow us on social media. And then for mentees and mentors, before we leave, don't go off yet. We have a few minutes left at the end of this. We'll stay on if you have any questions. And the attendance form today is in the chat now. So please complete the attendance form and then stay on mentors, mentees. And thank you very much again to our speakers.